There's a language we all speak, though few ever truly master it. It's older than words, more honest than any vow, and more revealing than a confession whispered in the dark. It's the language of human behavior, the silent stories told through eyes, hands, posture, and breath. To those who know how to listen with their eyes, the world becomes an open book. And once you master that art, nothing is hidden from you. Every gesture tells a story. Watch closely the way someone enters a room. Do they lead with confidence or shrink into the background? Do their eyes scan freely or do they seek the floor as if afraid of being seen? These movements are not accidents. They are the body's way of revealing what the mind is too afraid or too proud to say. You see, people wear masks with their words, but their bodies always tell the truth. Think of the last conversation you had where someone said they were fine. Did their tone match their words? Did their shoulders rise ever so slightly in tension? Did they avoid your gaze just for a moment too long? Most people would take the words at face value and walk away. But if you had been listening with your eyes, you would have heard the trembling beneath the surface, the truth behind the mask. We live in a world that often mistakes noise for meaning. Everyone wants to speak. Everyone wants to be heard. But few are truly listening, and fewer still are watching. But those who do, those who train themselves to observe, gain an edge that changes everything. In relationships, in leadership, in negotiations, and in life itself, the ability to read people without needing to ask a single question is a silent superpower. It begins with presence, being fully here, fully awake, not lost in thought, not preparing your response while someone is still talking. Not rehearsing your next move, just watching, noticing the subtleties that others overlook. The twitch of a lip, the tapping of a finger, the shift of weight from one foot to the other. These tiny signals, often ignored, are messages. They are windows into emotion, intention, and character. And when you begin to see people truly see them, something changes inside you. You become more patient, more understanding, more connected. Because now, you're not only hearing what someone wants you to hear, you're understanding what they're really trying to say. You begin to catch the fear behind anger, the vulnerability behind arrogance, the sadness behind the smile. And in those moments, empathy is born. We're taught in school how to write essays, solve equations, and memorize facts, but we're never taught how to read a person. And yet that skill, the ability to truly understand others, is perhaps the most valuable of all. It's not about judgment. It's not about manipulation. It's about awareness. Awareness that can guide you through every human interaction with clarity and compassion. A leader who understands body language will know when their team is silently overwhelmed. A parent who watches their child's posture can sense when something is wrong, even before words are spoken. A partner who observes the shifting light in their loved one's eyes can respond with kindness instead of conflict. This is the power of reading people. And you don't need a psychology degree. You don't need to be gifted. You only need to pay attention. The world is always speaking to you. Not with words, but with movement, expression, energy. Think about how the eyes light up when someone speaks about what they love. Think about the subtle sigh that escapes when someone's heart is heavy. Think about the nervous fidgeting in someone who feels like they don't belong. These are not random. They are soul deep communications and they are begging to be understood. But most people don't see them. Why? Because we're so focused on ourselves, on our next sentence, our image, our status, our response. We miss the cues. We miss the emotional fingerprints people leave behind in every encounter. And so we walk around blind, disconnected from others, wondering why we can't truly connect. But the moment you shift just slightly from speaking to watching, from performing to perceiving, you begin to unlock the secrets written in every interaction. The unspoken truths, the invisible emotions, the silent cries for help. And you realize that people don't need to be fixed, they need to be seen. To listen with your eyes is to offer a rare kind of respect, a presence so profound it melts walls. When someone realizes you're paying attention not just to their words, but to their being, they feel safe, they feel heard, they feel known. And in a world where everyone is trying so hard to be seen, you become the one person who actually does it. This ability doesn't just make you more intuitive, it makes you powerful. Because as you know how someone feels, you know how to respond. You know when to push and when to pull back, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to challenge and when to comfort. You no longer guess, you no longer fumble. You lead with awareness, you connect with intention, and slowly, the way you move through the world changes. You're no longer reactive, you're responsive. You don't assume, you observe, you don't rush to conclusions, you let people unfold. And in doing so, you unlock the very essence of influence. Because the greatest influencers are not the loudest, but the most attentive. Now imagine walking into a room and sensing the energy before a word is spoken, knowing who's confident and who's insecure, who's genuine and who's pretending, who's open and who's guarded. That kind of insight isn't mystical. It's earned through attention, through stillness, through practice. Make it a habit to observe without analysis. Just notice the way someone reacts when their name is called. The difference in their posture when talking to a superior versus a friend. The micro expressions that flash for less than a second but reveal everything. It's all there if you train your eyes to listen. This is not about becoming suspicious or skeptical. It's about becoming wise, aware, compassionate. Because when you understand someone's unspoken truth, you treat them differently. You communicate more effectively. You lead with more clarity. You build trust without even trying. And perhaps most beautifully, you begin to love people not for who they pretend to be, but for who they truly are. So let the world keep shouting. Let it keep performing while you remain still observing, learning, connecting, because every gesture tells a story. And those who master the art of listening with their eyes will always know what others cannot see. They'll see the truth. They'll see the soul. In the end, you realize something profound. People don't need to say much to be heard. They just need someone who knows how to watch. So become that person, the one who pays attention, the one who sees, the one who listens not just with ears, but with eyes and heart wide open. That's the art. That's the mastery. That's the gift. And it's waiting for you to claim it. Silence. It is the space between the noise, the breath between the words, the stillness that exists beneath the surface of everything. We often fear it, misunderstand it, or fill it too quickly, but silence is never empty. It is full of meaning, full of emotion, full of truth. And if you learn to sit with it, if you learn to respect its presence, you'll discover that silence holds secrets that words cannot hide. We live in a world obsessed with speaking. We rush to respond. We try to explain, to justify, to be understood, and in doing so, we overlook one of the most powerful forms of communication we have, the unspoken. The moment you realize that not everything needs to be said, and that not everything that is said is true, you begin to see the deeper layers of life and people. Have you ever sat beside someone you love, saying nothing at all, yet feeling as if your souls were speaking? Have you ever walked into a room and sensed tension in the air before a single word was uttered? Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and understood their pain without needing an explanation? That is the language of silence. It doesn't lie, it doesn't perform, it doesn't pretend. It simply is raw, honest, and real. Words are easy to manipulate. We use them to impress, to defend, to distract. But silence reveals. It exposes what words try to hide. That nervous laugh, that sudden pause, that quiet gaze when everything else has gone still. These are not mistakes, these are signals. And if you train yourself to listen not just to what people say, but to what they don't, you begin to access a deeper truth. There is courage in silence, power in stillness, wisdom in waiting. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Sometimes the silence between two people says more than 1,000 conversations. And sometimes silence is the only way the heart can speak when the mouth fails to find the right words. But in a world addicted to noise, this is a forgotten art. People speak before they think. They respond before they reflect. They fear the discomfort that silence brings because it forces them to confront their own thoughts, their own truths, their own vulnerability. But silence is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It reveals the parts of yourself you've been running from. It forces you to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. Sit in silence and you will start to hear the whispers of your own intuition, the quiet voice that says, you're not okay, and that's okay. The subtle feeling that something isn't right, even if everything looks perfect on the outside. The calm reminder that you don't need to prove yourself every time you feel unseen. Silence gives you space to hear your truth when the world becomes too loud. And it's in that space that transformation begins. Think about those who lead with true presence. The most powerful people don't need to shout. They don't need to dominate a room with volume. They dominate it with presence. Their silence draws attention. Their pause demands respect. Because silence, when used with intention, speaks louder than words ever could. When someone is silent in the face of insult, they show strength. When someone stays calm in the midst of chaos, they show mastery. When someone listens fully without interrupting, they show respect. And when someone holds silence after a moment of pain or joy, they allow the emotion to breathe, to exist without being explained away. There is a reason moments of awe leave us speechless. There's a reason heartbreak takes our words away. There is a reason grief is often shared not with a sentence, but with a silent embrace. Because the most profound experiences of being human do not fit neatly into words. They exist beyond language. And only silence can hold them. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, don't rush to fill the pauses. Let them exist. Let them speak. Let the silence do what words cannot. Watch the eyes. Watch the breath. Feel the energy. That's where the truth lies. People often reveal themselves the most in the moments when they stop talking. That deep exhale, that lingering gaze, that subtle shift of the shoulders, that hesitation before answering. These are not just pauses. They are expressions of the soul. And if you pay attention, you'll hear what others miss. You'll hear the fear behind the silence of a child who doesn't know how to say they're hurting. You'll hear the regret in the quiet of someone who once loved you but doesn't have the words to say they still do. You'll hear the hope in the silence of someone who believes in you, even when you've stopped believing in yourself. Silence reveals what the heart has not yet translated into language. And once you start to hear it, you'll never experience conversations the same way again. You'll begin to understand that every person you meet is saying something, even when they're saying nothing. And it's often the things they can't say that matter the most. But to access that level of awareness, you have to slow down. You have to become comfortable with stillness. You have to stop performing and start perceiving. Because when your mind is racing, when your ego is leading, when your insecurities are speaking for you, you'll miss it. You'll miss the quiet truths that change everything. So breathe, be still, and listen. Because silence is where empathy begins. It's where connection deepens. It's where healing starts. In silence, you give others space to be themselves, to come as they are, not as they think they need to be. In silence, you create safety as the foundation of every real relationship, personal, professional, or otherwise. There is beauty in the words unspoken, in the moments we don't try to fix, solve, or explain. There is grace in sitting beside someone in their pain without offering advice. There is power in holding your truth without forcing it on others. And there is strength in allowing silence to fill the spaces where once there was only noise. So let the world keep talking. Let it keep rushing and racing and shouting. You don't have to follow that rhythm. You can choose another way. You can lead with stillness. You can respond with awareness. You can connect through presence. And in doing so, you become unforgettable. Because people may forget what you said. They may even forget what you did. But they will never forget how it felt to be truly seen, to be met not with noise, but with understanding, not with answers, but with presence, not with judgment, but with quiet acceptance. That is the power of silence. That is the secret it holds. It shows you what's real, what's hidden, what's sacred. And if you're willing to listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart, you'll begin to hear everything that truly matters. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, in a conflict, in a moment of decision, pause. Let silence wise. Let it speak. Let it reveal what you couldn't see before. Trust it. Because silence is not the absence of communication. It's the presence of everything unspoken. And in that presence, you'll find truth. You'll find power. You'll find connection. But most of all, you'll find yourself. Emotion is a language that transcends borders, generations, and even time itself. It speaks through eyes that fill with tears before a single word is said. It moves through the way someone exhales after holding something in too long. It reveals itself in trembling hands, forced smiles, and the silence that lingers when the heart is too full to speak. Emotion does not always require sound. It lives in gestures and pauses and energies exchanged between two souls. To live fully, to lead powerfully, to love deeply, you must learn to speak the language of emotion, not the language of logic or performance, but the quiet, honest language that needs no translation, because it is universally felt. This is not a skill of the mind, but of the heart. It is not taught in classrooms. It is awakened through presence, through pain, through real connection. Most people walk through life emotionally illiterate, not because they lack feeling, but because they lack awareness. They speak in rehearsed scripts and learn behaviors, while their true emotions leak through the cracks. You can hear it in the laugh that's just a little too loud. See it in the eyes that never quite meet yours. Feel it in the way someone says they're okay when their whole energy says otherwise. These are not mistakes. They are signals. Signals from a soul trying to speak in a language that many have forgotten how to hear. If you want to truly understand others, if you want to build trust, influence, compassion, and depth, you must become fluent in emotional language. It begins by listening not just to words, but to everything that surrounds them, the tone, the tension, the timing. It's understanding that a trembling voice has more truth in it than a perfectly crafted speech. It's recognizing that someone crossing their arms isn't always being defensive. They might just be trying to protect a heart that's been broken too many times. And it starts with learning your own emotional language, because you cannot read others until you've learned to read yourself. Most of us are taught to suppress emotions, to smile when we want to scream, to push through pain, to never show weakness. But suppression is not strength, it's silence. And when you silence your emotions, you don't erase them, you bury them, and they begin to speak in ways you don't understand. Through stress, through anger, through disconnection, through exhaustion. Unfelt emotion never disappears, it just changes its mask. Learning to speak emotional language means giving yourself permission to feel fully and to observe those feelings without judgment. It means recognizing that sadness is not a flaw, but a signal. That anger is not evil, but a messenger. That fear is not failure, but a doorway. When you become emotionally aware, you stop reacting and start responding. You begin to ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? Where is it coming from? What truth is hiding beneath it? Then, as you deepen that understanding, you become more attuned to others. You begin to sense the loneliness in someone's eyes before they admit it. You feel the hesitation in their handshake. You hear the fear behind their bravado, and you no longer take people at face value because you've learned that human beings are layered, fragile, and beautifully complex. Think of the greatest connections you've had in your life. The ones that made you feel seen, safe, understood. Those moments didn't come from perfect words. They came from presence, from someone noticing when you were off, even when you said you were fine, from someone holding space for your silence, rather than filling it with advice, from someone who didn't try to fix you, but simply sat with you in your truth. That is emotional fluency. That is what changes lives, not loudness, but listening, not correcting, but connecting. You don't need to be a therapist or an expert. You just need to care enough to pay attention to the little things, the micro expressions that flicker across a face in less than a second, the nervous tapping of a foot, the way someone's voice softens when they talk about someone they love, the way their energy dims when they mention a certain part of their past. These are the unspoken parts of the story, and often they're the most important. When you become fluent in the language of emotion, you start to see beneath the surface. You begin to recognize that anger is often grief in disguise. That perfectionism is sometimes rooted in shame. That disconnection is usually self-protection. And suddenly, you're not just having conversations, you're building bridges. You're not just interacting, you're understanding. This awareness gives you power, not over others, but within yourself. Power to choose grace instead of judgment, to choose curiosity instead of criticism, to pause instead of react. That pause is where leadership is born. That pause is where love lives. That pause is where your greatest growth begins. Because when you can name your emotions, you can manage them. When you can feel them fully, you can free yourself from them. And when you can witness them in others without trying to control them, you create space for them to grow, to heal, to trust. And that space, that sacred emotional space, is where true transformation happens. In your career, emotional fluency sets you apart. It allows you to read a room, to lead with empathy, to communicate with clarity. In your relationships, it creates safety. It turns conflict into connection, miscommunication into intimacy. In your personal growth, it becomes your compass, guiding you not just toward what looks good, but toward what feels right. Imagine walking through life with the ability to understand people without needing them to explain themselves. Imagine knowing when someone is struggling without waiting for them to ask for help. Imagine being the person others feel safe around because you see not just what they show, but what they're afraid to reveal. That is emotional mastery. The truth is emotions are the most honest part of us. They show up before we can think, before we can lie, before we can pretend. Learn to read them, and you learn to read truth. Speak to them, and you speak directly to the heart. And when you do that, people will remember you not for your achievements, not for your charm, but for the way you made them feel. Because in the end, it's not about being impressive. It's about being impactful. And nothing impacts more deeply than the feeling of being understood. So begin today. Tune in, not just outward, but inward. Notice how your body speaks when your heart is full or when your spirit feels heavy. Notice how others shift when they feel judged and how they soften when they feel seen. Practice not filling every silence, not fixing every emotion, but honoring them. Let emotion speak, and you'll discover a world more honest, more beautiful, and more human than any you've known. This is the true art of connection, the silent language of the soul. And the more fluent you become in it, the more deeply you will lead and love. In the chaos of this world, where everyone is rushing to be heard, validated, seen, and understood, there's a rare and quiet strength that often goes unnoticed. The strength to be still. Not the stillness of apathy, not the silence of fear, but the powerful stillness that allows you to see people, not with judgment, not with ego, but with real deep understanding. But to reach that level of clarity, there is a journey. And that journey always begins within. To understand others deeply, you must first quiet your own mind. That sounds simple, but it is one of the most difficult things a human being can do, because the mind is rarely quiet. It is filled with voices of fear, of assumption, of memory, of pain. It's filled with the noise of comparison, pride, expectation, insecurity. When someone speaks, we don't just listen. We interpret, we project, we judge. We respond from our own wounds, not their words. And so what could have been connection becomes misunderstanding. We think we're hearing someone, but we're really just hearing our mind talk back. You cannot see someone clearly through a fog window, and you cannot understand someone clearly with a noisy mind. That's why true understanding requires more than intelligence. It requires presence, the ability to silence the storm within so that you can stand in front of another human being and actually see them, not through your past, not through your fears, not through your pride, but through their truth. This is rare, but it is beautiful, and it is transformative. Imagine the power of being able to look at someone, truly look at them, and feel what they feel. To understand what they mean even when they don't have the words. To sense the weight they carry even when they smile. To respond not with advice or defense, but with presence. That kind of understanding doesn't come from reading books. It comes from quieting yourself enough to receive another. But here's the truth: most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. They listen to protect their beliefs. They listen with ears that are tuned to their own agenda, their own emotions, their own stories. And so they miss it, the subtle shift in tone, the hesitation, the fear beneath the words. They miss the unspoken. They miss the real message. To understand others deeply, you must lay your ego down. You must learn to pause your need to be right, your need to be heard, your need to fix. You must enter the space between words, the space where truth lives. And you can only do that when your own mind is calm enough to hear what's real. So how do you quiet your mind? You start by becoming aware of how noisy it is. Notice how often you interrupt, not out loud, but in your thoughts. Notice how quickly you start thinking about what you're going to say next. Notice how fast you assume someone's meaning before they finish. That's your mind trying to control. That's your ego trying to stay in charge, but control blocks understanding. Assumption destroys connection. And ego always puts you in the center of a story that was never about you to begin with. To quiet your mind, you must practice presence. True presence, the kind that doesn't just stand there. It sees, it feels, it listens without waiting to speak. It listens without filtering every word through the lens of self. And it allows what is being said to land fully. Before responding, that is powerful, and it's also rare. We admire great speakers, but the truly wise admire great listeners, because great listeners are the ones who heal others, who make others feel safe, who create the space where others can be fully themselves. And they don't do this through words. They do it by being still enough inside themselves to make room for someone else's truth. Can you sit in silence while someone breaks? Can you hold your ground when someone's emotion triggers something inside you? Can you resist the urge to correct, to explain, and instead just witness another human being as they are? Yeah. That is understanding. That is mastery. The mind loves to control. It loves to label, to diagnose, to predict, but real understanding requires surrender. It asks you to put down your lens, your past, your opinions, and to enter someone else's world, not to judge it, not to fix it, but to experience it as they do. That is how empathy is born. Empathy is not agreement. It is connection. It is saying, I see you even if I've never walked where you've walked. And that kind of seeing, that kind of depth only comes when you are willing to quiet the storm within. We all want to be understood, but the irony is this: those who are best understood are usually the ones who have learned to understand others first, because people trust them. They feel safe around them. They know instinctively that they won't be judged, interrupted, or dismissed. And that trust opens the door to real lasting relationships in business, in friendship, and love. If you want to lead, learn to listen. If you want to connect, learn to be present. If you want to heal, learn to understand. And if you want to understand, first quiet your mind. Take a breath, step back, make space. When someone speaks to you, remind yourself, this is not about me, this is about them. Listen not just for words, but for meaning, for emotion, for energy. Pay attention to what's said and what's not. Watch the body. Feel the rhythm. Let their truth be the only thing that matters in that moment. And when your own thoughts rise up to judge, to answer, to fix, notice them. Then let them go. Return to the person in front of you. Return to the connection. This is not weakness. This is power, the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice or prove a point, the kind that changes people, not because it's forceful, because it's present, and presence is healing. Presence is unforgettable. Presence is love. We live in a time where distraction is normal, where noise is everywhere, where people hear but don't listen. And in that world, your ability to quiet your mind and truly see someone becomes a rare and priceless gift. And that gift doesn't just change others, it changes you, because the more you quiet your mind, the more clearly you begin to see, not just others, but yourself. You begin to notice how often your reactions are rooted in fear, in pride, and pain. You begin to recognize the patterns that block your growth. You begin to see where you've been blind to your own needs, your own ones, your own story. Self-awareness grows in silence. Healing happens in stillness. Wisdom arises in the space you create when you let go of needing to always be right. So be brave enough to be still. Be strong enough to listen. Be wise enough to pause. That pause might seem small, but in it lies your greatest power. The power to see, the power to understand, the power to connect. The next time someone speaks to you, don't just listen with your ears. Listen with your heart, with your whole being. Quiet the noise inside, make room for their truth. And you'll find that in understanding others, you don't lose yourself, you meet yourself. Because to understand deeply is to love deeply, and love, real, grounded, fearless love always begins in silence. There is a voice within you that has never been wrong. A quiet whisper that rises before the noise, before the analysis, before the logic. A feeling, a tug, a knowing. You felt it before, in moments of uncertainty, in sudden flashes of clarity, in the times you couldn't explain why something felt right or wrong, but deep down you knew. That voice is your intuition. And it is your superpower. We are taught from a young age to listen to reason, to follow rules, to respect facts. But what we are not taught is to trust ourselves, to honor the silent pull inside our chest when something just doesn't feel right, to believe in the invisible signals that our soul sends us in moments of risk, love, danger, or opportunity. And so we grow up doubting what is most ancient, most sacred, most powerful inside of us, the natural intelligence of our intuition. The truth is your intuition has always been trying to guide you. It's that instinct that makes you pause before saying yes. It's that unease that warns you when someone's words don't match their energy. It's that spark of inspiration that whispers an idea into your mind that no one else can see yet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply knows. But the world has made you forget. It has convinced you that every decision must be justified with logic, that you need evidence to believe your own feelings, that it's better to ask others than to ask yourself. And so you turn down the volume of your intuition. You mute it, you replace it with noise, opinions, fear, overthinking, and then you wonder why your path feels unclear. But the truth never left you. It's still there. Beneath the layers of doubt, beneath the years of ignoring your own wisdom, it's still waiting. Waiting for you to remember that you were born with a compass more precise than any map the world could ever hand you. Your intuition, the most powerful people in the world, the ones who lead with clarity, who make bold moves, who create, inspire, and change the game, have one thing in common. They trust themselves. They listen inward before they look outward. They know that data can guide you, but instinct decides. That logic can organize the facts, but intuition sees the truth behind them. Intuition is not magic. It is intelligence that bypasses the noise. It is awareness without effort. It's your subconscious processing every signal, every pattern, every detail that your conscious mind hasn't caught yet. And when it speaks, it comes through the body, a gut feeling, a heart flutter, a sudden tightness, a calm that doesn't make sense. You've had those moments. The times you didn't take that job and only later realized it would have made you miserable. The times you turned down a relationship that looked perfect on paper but didn't feel right. The times you took a risk, followed a dream, moved to a new place, said yes to something that made no sense except for that feeling in your chest that told you, this is it. That feeling, that knowing is your gift, but it must be trained, strengthened, because just like a muscle, intuition gets sharper the more you use it. Start by listening, not to the world, but to yourself. Begin with the small moments. When you meet someone new, do they feel open or guarded? When you're offered an opportunity, does your body feel excited or tight? When you're faced with a decision, what answer comes before the analysis, before the fear? Start paying attention to what your body is telling you. The body always knows. It carries your emotional truth. Your mind may lie. Your ego may protect, but your body will always speak honestly. If you are quiet enough to hear it, create space for silence. In silence, intuition speaks the loudest. The problem is not that intuition doesn't speak. It's that we rarely get quiet enough to hear it. We fill every moment with noise, with distractions, with scrolling, with doing. But intuition lives in the stillness, in the moment between the thoughts, in the breath you take before you react, in the pause before you speak. You must learn to trust that your inner wisdom is just as valid, if not more, than the voices around you. Because here's the truth. Other people can only advise you from their experience, but your intuition, it is built from your story, your purpose, your soul. It is connected to something deeper. It sees what others can't. It knows where you are meant to go, even when the path isn't clear yet. Sometimes intuition will guide you to something that makes no sense in the moment. You'll feel drawn to something or someone for no logical reason. You'll feel a nudge to leave, to begin to stay, to walk away. And your mind will fight it because the mind wants safety, proof, and clarity. But intuition wants truth. The more you trust your intuition, the stronger it becomes. And the more you ignore it, the quieter it gets. Until one day, you look around and realize you've been living a life that doesn't belong to you because you are following maps built by others instead of your own compass. But it's never too late to come back home to yourself, to remember that you were born with guidance, that your heart is not lost. It's just waiting for you to start listening again. And when you do, when you fully surrender to your own inner knowing, everything changes. You stop chasing things that don't fulfill you. You stop begging for permission. You stop doubting your worth. And you begin to move with a different kind of confidence, not the confidence that says, I have all the answers, but the kind that says, I trust myself to find them. You begin to make choices that feel aligned. You begin to attract people who resonate with your truth. You begin to walk paths that were meant for you, not because someone told you they were right, but because they felt right in your soul. Intuition is not about perfection. It's about alignment. It won't guarantee you avoid pain, but it will ensure that your path is real, that your life is yours, that your decisions come from a place of truth, not fear. And that, more than anything, is what leads to peace. So train it, trust it. When something feels off, believe it. When something feels right, even if you can't explain it, lean in. You don't need to justify your intuition to anyone. You only need to honor it, because it is speaking on behalf of the deepest part of you. And that part of you, that's where your power lies. In a world that teaches you to doubt yourself, let your intuition be your revolution. In a world that demands proof, let your inner knowing be your compass. In a world that is loud, choose to be quiet enough to hear what your soul is trying to say. Because your intuition is not just a gift, it is your superpower.